In this week's episode, we're talking, are they for real? Nazem Kadri, Florida Panthers. Hey, even Bruce, there it is. Are they for real? Some Montreal and Leafs talk. As well, we go deep in the Columbus Blue Jackets with the radio play-by-play and the hockey insider for the team of the Blue Jackets and discuss who's potentially available at the trade deadline and how good does Cole Sillinger look. Hit the music. Welcome to Jablam Sports Hockey. I'm your host, Peter Boudreau, and the mic is always on. It's your one-stop weekly shop for expert analysis on every single team. We are a fun hockey community, bring everyone together. You can find me on Twitter now at pboudreau, Bojarinov. V as in Victor, formerly at Russia98. You can find the full show at Jablam Sports. That's Jablam Sports. If you have any questions or comments, please tweet us. Use the hashtag at Jablam Sports. Please subscribe to us if you haven't done so yet, and click on those three dots in your podcasting app. Share our show with 3 hockey fans you know. Thank you, everyone. Remember, check out our website, www.jablamsports.com, for our podcasts and even game notes for each episode. You'll get all the links to everything we mentioned on this show, including guests. We've even got articles this year and much more content weekly. For our podcasts, click on podcasts on our website and then hockey on this show specifically, right on our website. Time for this week's Trending Now. We've got my pal Ian Boisvert. He's managing editor for Rabid Habs. You can get him on the podcast, Nosebleedscast. Where are you now? I've been seeing you a lot lately somewhere else, Ian.
Yeah, I've been stepping in a little bit with my buddy Scott Matla at Locked On Canadiens. Laura has been out last few weeks, so popping in whenever I can to help out. I love talking Habs with those guys. They run a great show over there. If you haven't checked out Locked On Canadiens and you're a Canadiens fan, please do that. They put a lot of work into what they do, and it shows in the product.
And you can find Ian on Twitter at maybe it's Ian. A lot of things we're going to discuss, and we're going to talk, are they for real or not, in just a bit. But first, of course, we got to talk a little bit of the Habs and the Leafs, since that's the markets we're in. Number one, Ian, what's going on with Montreal's management? What's the update there?
Yeah, so I mean, all reports seem to be leading towards the Canadiens hiring a general manager within the next few days. They at some point last week, a report had come out that said they were looking to finish the process within 10 days. So we are at days instead of weeks now. Mm-hmm. There are some obvious front runners. There were some interesting names in there as well. Most interesting to me anyway was Emily Castonguay, the agent for Alexis Lafreniere. But I do think that the clubhouse leader for that position of general manager is still Mathieu Darche. I think he's still exactly what the team is looking for. He has a pedigree in Tampa. He's learned from some of the best general managers in Tampa when it was Steve Yzerman and now it's Julien Brisebois. I think he's a slam dunk. I think he's someone that the entire franchise, the fan base can get behind. I mean, the proof is in the pudding. That Tampa team is good. And how much of that is Darche's doing, it's kind of unclear. But, it'll be interesting to see. I'm more interested to see who fills out the assistant general managers. I think Daniel Doré, who is a scout for the Rangers at the moment, I wonder if he gets a look. I know Elliot Friedman had teased that a little bit because him and Gorton go back to their time in Boston together, and then obviously they worked with the Rangers together. I like him as a choice. Or I should say, I think he's a front runner for a front office position. So we'll see. It's interesting, of course, that Patrick Waugh keeps being brought up. I think I speak for most of the fan base when I say we don't really want that. This period for the Canadiens, they need stability. They need a calming influence, I think, to sort of quell a lot of the issues that come about in that market.
Yeah.
So I don't think Patrick Waugh is a fit for that reason. But we'll see. I'm interested to see what happens. I'm interested because the Canadiens, as bad as they've been, a lot of that's been exacerbated by their COVID issues, injury issues, any of those things. When they come back, there's still some meat on the bones for the Canadiens. Not so much that I'm saying they'll make a run at the playoffs, but more so who steps in and what's the plan? Are we going to start shipping bodies off? Are we, going to assess and play it by ear and go into the summer and worry about, trades then? So lots of stuff still to happen for this Canadiens team. It's just a shame that, the most exciting part of it isn't even on the ice.
That is quite a shame. And there was a lot of excitement last spring. Now going to what you were talking about, maybe not so many trades. What do you feel? Do you think this team, like you said, they have the meat on the bones, but are they going to maybe remove some of that meat and do like at least a semi-rebuild once they figure out who the GM is?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's been some rumblings out of Montreal that's not a reality, that rebuild is not something they're going to move forward with. Maybe somewhat more of a retooling. They're going to get a really high pick in this draft. There's not a lot of opportunities for them to move up as far as the draft lottery goes. I know, they're in a battle with Arizona for last place, which thanks to the Edmonton Oilers, that doesn't guarantee you the first overall pick. That you want to land somewhere real low. I think if you're the Canadiens, you're really hoping it's just top 10 so that Carolina doesn't get that pick, or I think it's Arizona doesn't get that pick and they get Carolina's instead in the Christian Dvorak deal. They've got a good prospect pool. I know there's a lot of rumblings about Jordan Harris potentially not signing with Montreal at the end of his college season, which would make him an unrestricted free agent. I think a lot of that's overplayed, but it is what it is. But I don't think we've seen the best hockey out of Cole Caulfield. I don't think we've seen the best hockey out of Nick Suzuki. Caden Gooley's on his way. He was named the captain of Team Canada at the World Juniors, and they obviously didn't play the rest of that tournament. So they're in a really interesting situation. I don't think that they're not going to be able to turn this around and win, say, while Price is still under contract or anything like that. So I guess at that point you're gauging, well, how much do we actually go for it? How much do we actually spend money instead of relieving yourself of some cap stressors? Can you find a home for Shea Weber's contract? Could you use Shea Weber's contract to potentially sweeten the deal for another team? I've seen some ideas floated around that it's possible you could trade Carey Price to another roster and tag on Shea Weber's contract that is long-term IR eligible. Yeah. So that way Carey Price comes in at like $3 million essentially because you've moved into that cap overage with the long-term injured reserve. So I hope the next general manager is real creative. I don't really want a rebuild or not a rebuild. I don't really have a preference there. I want to see them get creative with what they have in front of them.
And they sure do have a fair bit of pieces to be creative with. Now to the market that I'm in, the GTA, Toronto area. This team, everybody talks about how, yeah, you could say they have what it takes. They have the pieces and everything. But mentally, or not exactly all the full pieces, they can't get out of that first round. It's been a brain lock on them the last few playoffs, and again against Montreal last year. They feel like they're even better. They look even better this year. All their bottom six are rolling right now. Jack Campbell looks even better than he played last year. What's gonna stop them from getting past that first round? Because it's all arrows point to this is the year they're gonna finally do it.
Yeah, I think that's the scariest part, I think, for Leaf fans is that I don't think it really matters how good that team is.
Mm,
You know, they're they might put together the best season in franchise history this year, and you know, it won't matter if they get into the playoffs and they stumble in the first round again. I look and I see Boston as a team that could still be there. Come the first round of the playoffs, if the Leafs win the division and Boston's a wild card team, well, I mean, that's not a situation I think the Leafs actually want to be in.
yeah.
Um, it just comes down to them performing for 2 weeks. I mean, when you think about it, like, all of the heartbreak that the Leafs have suffered in these 7 game losses, excluding the Columbus one that took place over 5 games in the bubble. It's really just 2 weeks of hockey where there was one series against Boston where I thought Toronto was the better team.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in the series against Montreal, through the first 5 games, Toronto was the better team.
Even the series versus the Capitals, which they were considered underdog, they still had a very, very good shot at winning that series as well.
A lot of overtime games.
Yeah.
I want to say of the 4 games they lost, I think 3 of them were in overtime. So they've been right there the whole time. It's really like it's something that, like, if they go into the first round of the playoffs, and I hate to put it on one guy, I really do, but it's the way that Mitch Marner has carried himself in the playoffs over the last few years. It's been hard hockey for him.
Yeah.
And I think back to the series against Montreal where he was almost invisible. He took a delay game penalty, I think must have been game 6, that allowed Montreal to come back in the game. It's just when one guy starts to get down and it's a guy of that high of a magnitude, it's really hard for a team to overcome that. I think the only thing harder would be if it was a goalie, to be honest. You can't overcome bad goaltending in a playoff series. Like I said, it just comes down to those guys for 2 weeks, maybe shorter if they can get out of it in 4 or 5 games, 6 games. But you need the best hockey out of those guys. I don't think every year we've gotten into the playoffs, there's 1 or 2 players that don't show their best hockey, whether it was Kadri in the year that he got suspended. And I was at his last game as a Maple Leaf. I was in Boston for that playoff game when he got ejected and then suspended the rest of the series.
Wow.
Whether it's him or Marner or Matthews, like they can't have a passenger this year.
I'm with you on that. I feel that, and I think Elliot Friedman touched base on it too with the Canucks and the way they were struggling. Pettersson is the setup man for Brock Besser. Yeah. And when Pettersson is not mentally on his game and he's trying to do too much because you want to be worth that contract, you want to make sure you do as much in everything, every 110%, 150%, you try to overdo it. And even we noticed William Nylander tried to do that first year of his contract. Marner's been like that since day one of the last year pretty much, and he put too much pressure on himself in the playoffs. And I still feel it's still lingering in his head, even this season. And, of course, we all know Matthews and Tavares and all the rest had injuries going into the playoffs. Right. But if your setup man is not setting up your big man, you're not going to do it. And it's a mental game. It is a big mental game, especially in the playoffs. I've always said it's partially that, and it's partially goaltending. For the Leafs, Freddie Anderson was never the better goaltender in each of the series, but now it's a mental thing, and it's a mental mindset, and you kind of get that more with experience. You get your head in the right zone, and you hope maybe Mitch Marner needs a Matt Martin up his ass to burn a fire in him the right way, and maybe he can turn it around.
Yeah, I mean, they need a Pat Maroon type, Pat Maroon, not to say that, everywhere he goes, he wins, even though that seems to be true the last little while, but a guy that's just, he'll go through a wall for his team. He'll push his teammates. I think that's what they hope they got in Wayne Simmons. I mean, everyone loves Wayne Simmons there. There's no complaints with his deal at all. We would have loved him in Montreal if he actually ended up signing here, like it looked like he was going to.
Yeah.
But like Montreal had Corey Perry, you know, a guy at the end of his career making one last run at it who can still play. I mean, Corey Perry played some really good hockey for the Canadiens down the stretch.
Yeah.
They need guys like that. I bet they're aggressive at the trade deadline, and I bet they grab a guy like that from somewhere. I don't know who's available, or who will even be on rosters at that point in the season. It's still, we're looking at the end of March for the trade deadline, but Dubas likes those guys. I don't see like a roster deficiency for them. I know they want to add a blue liner,
Yeah.
but I don't see a glaring issue. The
Yeah.
goaltending's not an issue. Jack Campbell's look great, and behind him is potentially Peter Mrazek, who can be great in moments.
Yeah.
If there was ever a year for them to get out of the first round, this would be the one.
I've always been a big fan of Brad Marchand, even though as a person in the Toronto area, I shouldn't. But
Right.
he gives it his all, even though he's a dirty little guy. And the other one, man, I'm just getting a brain fart right now. And I said this 3.5 years ago. I said this after the first year of Mitch Marner, and I said Mitch Marner is a great player. Right now, they should trade Mitch Marner for Matthew Tkachuk and a first or second round pick, because that is the type of player you need in the playoffs. And they already have a guy like Mitch Marner in William Nylander, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I like William Nylander a whole lot.
Yeah,
I'm a big William Nylander fan. But back to Naz, like, I think he's on pace for like 120 something points, like, which has been nice because there's been not a lot has been made about Nathan MacKinnon's quote struggles to start the season. I mean, he's still incredible. He's just not scoring goals.
Yeah.
But I mean, whether or not you believe Naz is for real and this is who he's going to be as a player moving forward, he's got to be loving life right now. Like, he's in a great situation.
Yeah.
Playing on a really, really loaded Colorado Avalanche team that are just super fun to watch every single time you turn them on. You just hope that he doesn't have one of those, moments that Kadri is known to have, where he goes off the deep end a little bit. And it's a shame that we even have to mention those because he is such a supremely talented hockey player.
Yeah.
But I'm going to say that he's for real this season. Like, those points are not a mirage. He's not lucking into those points because he is this kind of player. I don't know how repeatable it is, but I'm going to say that he is for real.
And I want to throw out there one last thing with Kadri. I've always thought he's a great player. And when he was younger, everybody's mature. Patrick Kane, the list goes on. The first few years, you're immature. You do stupidness. You tweet stupidness. It happens. We all do it. NHL players are obviously under more scrutiny, and athletes and musicians and anybody in the limelight has way more scrutiny. But he's grown up really right before our eyes in the last few years. And I think he's going to be even more grown up this year because obviously it's a contract year. So if he doesn't do what we've seen him do, and again, he's done it for his teammates. He's that little thing happened in his head and he goes and hits somebody from behind because something's happened to his teammate. So he is a teammate first guy type of guy. So if he controls that, and I think I say he will, Colorado goes all the way and possibly wins the Stanley Cup. How much money, being over 100-point player, being a free agent, where is he going to go and how much money is he going to make next year? This is unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really, like I said, he's in a great situation. I bet he would love to stay in Colorado because that's where he has success.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a way they can fit him into their situation.
No.
They're definitely not going to trade him because he's just to get rid of a rental. They're going to treat him as an own rental.
Yeah.
But I mean, if he's probably the top free agent at this point anyway. I don't know. I'd love to see him. I'd love to see what happens with him next. I can't think of a team off mind that, could use a guy, or I should say, who really, really needs a guy like him who would back up a truck for Nazem Kadri.
Yeah.
Maybe a team like San Jose, they need center depth. They've got good young wingers. It's possible that's a fit there. Maybe Ottawa makes a splash. They finally decide, hey, it's time we start moving this thing forward. I mean, could you imagine a line with Nazem Kadri and Brady Tkachuk? I would throw my TV out into the street. They would just be the worst hockey. I would be so mad every night watching them play, even if they weren't playing the Canadiens. I would just hate that line so much.
Yeah. I doubt a team like Ottawa would do, because you got to really back up that truck, and there have always been that team about the money. How about the Detroit Red Wings?
That's a fun one. Yeah.
My goodness, because we know their original 16, they have the money, they have the cap space, and the way their team is trending, I see it as a bit of a fit in my view. There obviously could be a few teams. The Kraken could be one of them.
Sure.
But my goodness, and that contract, I'll be shocked if it's under 8.5. Like the way he's playing right now, and even before, say, this year, if he continued to play at his old pace, he'd probably be making 6.5, 7,
sure.
Right? But the way he's playing right now, unbelievable.
Kills penalties. He plays both special teams. Like that's a guy that's going to make $6 million. You know, if he's putting up, you know, if he's putting up 50 points. Like, I mean, look at Phil Danault last summer. You know, like that's a. If I'm Kadri, and I'm having a normal Kadri season, that's probably my comparison.
Yeah.
But, you know, he's way more than that this year. So, he's cashing in at the right time.
He sure is. Are the Florida Panthers for real? They lead the league in points. The Cats are preying on everyone right now.
I think they are. Like, said that they have a hole at goaltending. I don't think they do at this point, because Bobrovsky has had sort of a resurgent season. Not quite worth that cap hit, but he's at a 917 right now. You know, like they're in really good shape. It's just a shame that, you know, out of them, Toronto and Florida, you know, by the third round, only one of those teams is going to be left. Just based on the numbers of how the playoff standings work.
Yep.
I think they're for real. I think they're loads of fun to watch. But I think that team, you know, Quenneville stepped down, or was, you know, asked to step down, I think is probably more apt to say.
Yeah.
And that team hasn't skipped a beat. So it's been, you know, I think they're a legitimate team, a legitimate threat to win a cup too, which is weird to think that there's two of those teams in Florida.
It's unbelievable what they have there, and I wished there would be more fans in attendance to watch that team. That is phenomenal team. They're so good. You know what? I think they're my pick out of those three to make it to the third round. I just feel that they have all the right pieces right now. Aaron Ekblad, if he's not talked about enough, he should be. He should be at least in the top 3 for the Norris. Yeah. And they're just, the team is unbelievable. They totally are for real. I even thought last year they almost won the showdown in the Sunshine State. So it was that close. That was the hardest challenge for Tampa, I would say, last year in the playoffs.
Oh, easily. Yeah. I mean, the Islanders brought a unique challenge just because of what they are as a hockey team. They're you know, they remind me of like the mid 90s or late, you know, early 2000s Devils, in which they just like locked things down. But yeah, that Florida Panthers series was really, really fun. And I think they want a rematch real bad.
I think everybody in the hockey world wants to see that rematch again.
Yeah.
That would be phenomenal. All right. This is an interesting one. Is Tristan Jarry for real? He's first in the league in goals against average, third in save percentage among goaltenders with over 20 games. Is he for real?
I think he certainly figured it out. You know, the Penguins have been kind of running, at least up before this year, had been running as like a two-headed monster in goal with him and DeSmith. But I think Jarry, I think Sullivan wanted Jarry to be the guy. I think he leaned on him the most. And then I think it's paid off for him. You know, another goalie who just like Bobrovsky came into the season, people probably didn't think that highly of him. At the same time, I think the Penguins are a legitimate force again, and they were doing it all without some combination of Crosby and Malkin. Yep. You know, Evan Rodrigues is shooting the lights out, which is just insane because so many teams gave up on him for nothing. You know, Buffalo did it. I think the Leafs had him for a second. he was in Pittsburgh, gone, and then back in Pittsburgh. It's just they always seem to have a really good mix of players in there, and it's nice to see them, to see Jarry come out in that list again. I felt really bad for the way that he was, you know, discussed after the series loss to the Islanders, because he wasn't particularly good in that series. I mean, he gave up a couple of really, really brutal goals at inopportune times. So it's just nice to see him bounce back.
For me, he's not for real, in my opinion. Until he proves me otherwise, especially in the playoffs, he's not for real. This team is so underrated as a full team unit, as a two-way team. The Pittsburgh Penguins, what Crosby has, everybody watching over Crosby, and they learn from him how he plays the game. And he's the third coach out there. He's like coaching his teammates in between shifts on the ice.
Yeah.
It's phenomenal to watch Sidney Crosby in his era. And even as he ages, he'll continue to be innovative and be helpful to all his teammates and in the game of hockey. So underrated, even though we all talk about how amazing he is, he still is. Yeah. And Tristan Jarry, in my opinion, he's not for real until he shows me otherwise in the playoffs. Last but not least, Bruce, there it is. That's what they're chanting in Vancouver. Is Bruce Boudreau for real? Since he took over for Travis Green as the head coach of the Vancouver Canucks, they've looked unstoppable. I think they're 8-0-1. So I'm guessing playoffs is obvious. Can they keep going? Is Bruce the guy that you want on any team? If your team is down and he's available, you bring him in because everybody loves Bruce.
Yeah, I mean, everyone loves Bruce until it's Game 7, which is the problem, right? I mean, and I love the energy that the Canucks have right now. I love that fan base is reinvigorated by this. And that's, before they were getting goaltending this whole time. Thatcher Demko has been very, very good for Vancouver. Yeah. It's just the everything else wasn't working. I think a lot of that was the team that Jim Benning built wasn't really that great. But I think when Bruce showed up, he went to Brock Besser and said, "You just have to shoot the puck more." And sure enough, that cured what ailed him. I don't know if this is a mirage. I'm a lot of teams have that post-coast coaching change bump. It's real. It's a real thing that teams experience when they change head coaches, especially going to a guy that's such an emotional leader like Bruce Boudreau is. I'm curious to see how this plays out, if they can maintain this level of play. They're not going to go, 25-1-3 for the rest of the season. I mean, that's just not a reality.
Yeah.
But can they play 650 hockey the rest of the way? I'm not sold on it. I think that team has some flaws to it still. I'm not a huge fan of the way that they play. But we'll see. I always like the stories of the teams who are at like the bottom of the barrel at one point in the season and then make their way back up. The Canadiens were like that at one point last season. The year the Blues won the Cup, they made the same sort of coaching change midway through the year. They were in last place and they ended up winning the whole thing. I guess the thing I'm looking for is the same thing you're looking for in Jarry. Is I want to see that sustained. I want to see that play out not only for a few weeks in December. I want to see it in February. I want to see it in March when if those races start to clarify a little bit more and you start to see who's on the bubble and who's actually in it.
Yeah. I feel that Bruce Boudreau is for real. Are the Canucks for real? That's another question. Ian, thank you for joining me. You can find him on Twitter at @MaybeIt'sIan. Up next on Team ISO, who will get traded at the deadline from the Columbus Blue Jackets and more with Bob McElligott and Jeff Svoboda. For this week's Team ISO, we are team isolating the Columbus Blue Jackets. On this week's panel are Bob McElligott. He's the radio play-by-play for the Blue Jackets. You can find him on Twitter at Bobby Max Sports. Welcome to the show, Bob.
Thank you very much. Great to be with you. Sorry, I was, I should have been better dressed for you today here, but I ended up being out at an appointment I wasn't planning on. So it's a good thing you're just looking for the voice anyway here.
Yeah, no, it's all right. We might.
This is why I'm on radio. This is exactly why I'm on radio right here, just so you know.
We might. Sorry to tell you, we might put this on YouTube, but it's not.
No, that's fine. I'm just saying, face made for radio. That's. I'm just proving that to you right here.
No, you are a beauty. You look beautiful. You're good. And of course, back on the show is Jeff Svoboda. He's the Columbus Blue Jackets team reporter. On the website, you can get him at Jackets Insider. Welcome back, Jeff.
Great to be here. And unlike Bob, I did try to dress for the occasion. But as we were joking beforehand, there's actually a photo. Bob and I both have this. I'm wearing a burgundy sweater. We both own this sweater, and we have actually, unfortunately, on some days worn it on the same day. And there is photographic evidence of it. A couple years ago, we took the train from Ottawa to Montreal, and both are made fun of significantly for that photo. But it's a good memory.
That's awesome. Can Elvis Merzlikins actually score an NHL goal? It seems like he thinks he can do it easily.
Can he? Yes. Will he? Who knows? I mean, it's a hard thing to do, right? But nobody's practiced it that I've seen in the National Hockey League more than this guy.
All right.
And I've seen him a couple of games where the net was empty on the other end, and I see him gearing up for it. And I know he's going to take a whack at it. Hasn't happened yet, but can he? Yes, I think he can.
Yeah, I have said since he made his debut and just seeing what a good puck handler he is. And then you add in the audacity you kind of have to try to score an NHL goal. Between the skill and that, I think he will at some point. And again, the situation has to line up well. He had a really good chance earlier this year against San Jose, and it ended up getting batted down, but he said it was right on line to go in. So and that just goes to show you, though, how hard it is for it to happen. But he's certainly going to try. And so I think that one of these days, would not surprise me at all if that happens. It's one of those predictions I've had since he got here. I think it's going to happen, but like Bob says, it's so hard to make happen, but you just never know. But if anybody's going to do it, it's going to be Elvis.
The team is very, Jekyll and Hyde. Their home record suggests they're a top 10 type team, 11-5-1, but on the road, they're maybe bottom 5 in league. And it's pretty much going the same with Elvis, right? At home, he's 12-2-1, 928 save percentage, and 240 goals against average. And then on the road, he's like 47th in the league. 2 wins, 6 losses, .871 save percentage, 472 goals against average. Why has been Ohio cooking helped Elvis and the team?
Well, I think when you look at it, what's the biggest difference between the home games and the road games? And it's who gets the last line change, who gets the matchup that they want to get. And with this team, it is young. I mean, again, we for years, Jeff and I have talked about this being the youngest team in the National Hockey League. But in the past, when it was the youngest team, you still had the Nick Folignos and the Seth Jones and the Cam Atkinsons and the David Savards. So even though there was a lot of youth, that experience still kind of got them through all of that. None of those guys is here now. And even though there are guys that have been here for a long time, like Boone Jenner, and Zach Werenski's been here what's considered a long time now, but it's just it's different. It's a new wave. And, you've got Cole Sillinger, who's 18 years old. You want him on the ice in a favorable matchup, and you get that when you're playing at home, and you don't get that when you're on the road. I mean, coaches are going to look out there and they see Sillinger and Yegor Chinnikov, and all of a sudden they go, oh, I know who we're going to put out against those guys, right? So it's, and for Elvis, it just all comes back to the same thing. If you're not getting the matchups that you want, if the home team is able to exploit the defensive liabilities of the line that's on the ice, that's just going to make it harder for the goaltender. And I think when you boil it all down, that's really what it is. I think that this group really gets energy off playing in front of the home crowd. They really, really do. And maybe more so than any group I've seen at this point in the season. Like in the playoffs, that's a big thing. But I think it's been a big thing throughout the season for this team. So they really feed off that energy well. But, when you go beyond that, they get what they want when they're at home. and they don't get what they want when they're on the road, and they've been exploited.
And one thing I'd add on to that too is if you looked at the schedule for the Blue Jackets, there was a stretch from mid-November through basically late December that was a straight month where this team was on the road, and they were hard road trips. They were West Coast trips. We've pretty much knocked off pretty much the entire Western Conference on the road at this point. So, Colorado, Vegas, Seattle, Vancouver, Edmonton, the hardest trips of the year all took place in a very short time frame. And the travel really, you could tell for a young team, as Bob mentioned there, it became a grind. It was a grind for me as a guy who's not playing hockey, but just getting on those flights and some of the long flights we had and some of the long trips we had. It was exhausting. And again, I'm not even playing the game. And so I think for this team, being so young, you have to learn how to win on the road. It became a grind. It became very tough. You're playing tough teams, big teams, heavy teams, the Nashvilles and Dallases of the world. And so they went on a stretch there where they just did not play very good hockey on the road. At the end of the day, there's no excuses. You got to play better. But it seemed like it was just a really tough stretch. And that really is, that ended up hurting just the way that they were playing. It ended up hurting the way that Elvis was playing in front of them because, as the things that Bob was talking about were coming true. It was just a tough stretch there. And so I'll be very curious to see if that road record improves a little bit as the year goes on. Maybe you get more experience, maybe you're taking shorter trips. You're not going out as west as much. And so maybe it's easier to go, New York or Washington or some of these rather than being out on the road for a week or two at a time. Maybe it'll get better as that year goes on. It'll be interesting to see just how that shakes out at the end of the day.
Sounds like they love hearing the cannon. In the Eastern Conference preview episode, that was episode 2 of the season 7, the consensus was Columbus would finish last in the Metro. But here we are, almost, just past starting the new year. They're 5th in the division, a little bit further outside of a playoff spot. But every single person pegged them to be last. Why are they proving teams wrong so far, Jeff?
I think part of it is, the Metro, if you looked around the Metro, it was in some ways a pretty fair pick. You had some of these established teams like the Islanders. I know they haven't had the year that you would have expected, but, you look at Pittsburgh, you look at Washington, the Islanders, et cetera. I mean, these are teams that have been among the best teams in the National Hockey League for a long time and still returned a lot of darn good players. And then you looked at a team like New Jersey, which is maybe the other team you would have thought would have been kind of in that area, but they're a good young team. And you've seen what Jack Hughes has done and kind of the young core that they've built that is now together for maybe a 3rd or 4th year and starting to move up the standings. So I understand why the Blue Jackets were picked where they were, but I think there also was a little bit of people forgot the good players that were on this team because last year was a disaster. There's no way around it. And then, there were some trades made. Seth Jones gets traded. Cam Atkinson gets traded. There was the Nick Foligno deals at the end of the year, things like that, where a good part of the veteran presence went out of here. But you also look at it, and, you've got Patrick Laine. You've got Jakub Voracek. You've got Albert Bjorkstrand, who's one of the most underrated players in the league. You've got, Elvis has been, when he's been hot, this team's been very good. Zach Werenski signing a big contract this year. There were still some pretty good players there, and some of the youth coming in and coming along as well. I think they were a little bit disrespected. I mean, not a ton, because at the end of the day, I've said they probably should have been just looking at it on paper, kind of down there compared to some of the teams that they're going up against. But there was more talent here than I think people realized, and it gelled at the start of the season, started playing really well. Then, as we were talking about a couple minutes ago, the tough road swings and just the ups and downs you're going to have in an NHL season, especially with such a young team, certainly have taken their toll. But at the end of the day, they're at 500 at this point. That's about the way they've probably played. There's going to be more adversity. There's going to be more ups and downs. But they've hung in there. They've stole some games. They've won some games, and they've been able to make it work up to this point.
Continuing.
Well, let's be honest. The people that are picking them to finish last, they're not in Columbus. I mean, it's an easy pick. It is so easy based on the things that Jeff just said. You look at it and you go, oh, they lost everybody. They'll be last. And that's not fair. It's absolutely not fair because there is still a good ton of a character and talent that is with this team. I said from the beginning, it's recorded. You can go find it easily. I said they're not going to be as bad as people from outside the market think they're going to be, but that doesn't mean they're going to make the playoffs. And that's just about where they are right now. They are, look, Jersey's got Jack Hughes and they signed Dougie Hamilton. They got some guys, but there was no way. If you would have asked me in August, are the Blue Jackets going to finish below the Devils? I would have said no. I'm not a Devils believer until they make me believe. But I know this team. I've been around this team. So, yeah, it's an easy, sexy pick to make last if you're not around here and you don't know who's on this team and you don't know anything about some of the guys that are on the team. And Jeff made a good point. Oliver Bjorkstrand, like, who talks about Oliver Bjorkstrand in the National Hockey League unless we're talking about him? But he's a doggone good player. He's the leading scorer on this team. And, you know, he leads by example. And I think you're going to hear more about him now that some of these other guys have moved out as the next couple of years go down. But yeah, to me, it was easy. I mean, you know, just like it's easy for me to bang on Jersey. I'm not there. I don't see him every day. So it's a heck of a lot easier for me to do because of that. And that's the same way I think that the international media was with the Blue Jackets at the beginning of the year.
I love this fired up, Bob.
Well, it's just that part drives me nuts. You know, I mean, this is I knew that. Jeff, you knew that. You've been around here, you know, and you know, you could watch all the shows and listen to all the programs and podcasts, and some of them I just wanted to send them a message and go, "You're an idiot." I mean, you don't know. Just shut up. It's an easy pick. Why don't you pick Philly to stink, which they do? You know, nobody was going to do that, but that's because the Blue Jackets were an easy pick. So yeah, it does fire me up. You're right.
I don't know how to fire up further from that, but maybe the trade with the Seth Jones will. Jeff, you mentioned it. You guys are playing. The team is playing Chicago next, so they had to kind of get rid of Seth because obviously they couldn't keep him with the contract that he wanted, and Chicago locks him up 8 years, $9.5 million, and the Jackets end up getting 2 firsts, a second, and Bukvist. So the young defense led by Werenski, they're fairly underrated in my opinion, including adding Jake Bean in the offseason and a 3-year deal. Why has the defense of that young team kind of worked so far early on in the season, Bob?
Well, you could make the argument they haven't worked so far this season when it comes to defense. I'll tell you what, offensively, they work pretty well. Okay. I mean, Adam Boquist, his offense is there. His defense still needs to come. And it will, because he's a young guy. Jake Bean, I think it's the same thing. I think this guy he's still young. I think he still has, you know, he can fill out a little bit more and, you know, physically. And I think he's going to be better. But, you know, you go back to that trade. First of all, remember, the Seth Jones thing had nothing to do with the money. The Seth Jones thing had to do with Seth not wanting to be here and wanting to go somewhere else. So, yeah, you were going to trade him. They were not going to go through that scenario they went through with Artemi Panarin and Sergei Bobrovsky. I know why they did that, because they felt they had a team that could win the Stanley Cup that year. So that's a different beast. Here, you know, you don't. So if the guy doesn't want to be here, you got to get him out of here. And that was a great trade. You know, as you said, you get Boquist. He was an 8th overall by Chicago. And then you get that 2nd round pick, which enables you to make the trade with Carolina and get Jake Bean. So you get rid of a really good, high-quality NHL defenseman, but you do get 2 NHL defensemen in exchange, plus a 1st-round pick that you use to take Cole Sillinger, which is going to pay dividends, and then Chicago's 1st-round pick next year, which, I mean, look where that is right now. And I know it's a long way to the end of the season, but, you know, we set up to have 2 top 10 picks in a deep draft. So that was a great trade. And it did have to happen. It's unfortunate it had to happen, but you know what? You're not tied up with $9.5 million for 8 years. You did get 2 guys already, and then you got a draft pick that you absolutely wanted, and you're going to get another one that is going to be potentially a good player too. So, you know, all in all, that's great. But as I said, defensively, Vladislav Gavrikov, he's been himself. He's been really good defensively. And just talking about the defensive side of the puck, Andrew Peeke was asked to come in here and play a physical brand of hockey this year, and he has done just that. You know, there was talk amongst us at the beginning of the year, is Peeke going to be in that bottom pair, or is he not going to be able to be on the ice every day? He's done a great job of making sure that he is. I've had 0 problems with that guy, the way that he has played. And then, like I said, Jake Bean and Adam Boquist, they still have to mature. I think Zach Werenski is playing the best overall game that I've seen him play since he came here, which is good. But that they are going to get better defensively as a unit. I don't think there's any question about that. Offensively, I think they got a lot of stuff figured out, but they are defensemen. That's the name of the position. Mm-hmm. They need to get a little bit better when it comes to that part of it.
Yeah, Bob said a lot of astute things there, so I don't have a ton to add to that. But if you look at it, you know, Seth Jones gets traded for what's essentially 5 pieces. It's Cole Sillinger, It's Jake Bean, it's Adam Boquist. Well, those guys are already in the NHL, young, going to get better, playing really good minutes. 2 first-round picks next year. One was already the Jackets pick, so I had 4 pieces. But one's the Blackhawks pick. That's a pretty darn good haul for Seth Jones at the end of the day. So as you look at that trade, it's hard to evaluate now because of what so much of it will still be to come. But if you're the Blue Jackets, I think you would make that deal 100 times out of 100, especially in the situation that they were in. And then the other thing I would say is this was a stat from the game against the Devils on Thursday. And it's a little bit unfair because Zach Werenski was out because of COVID protocol. So that's a lot of NHL games out of the lineup. Jay Christensen was playing on defense, making his NHL debut. So this was a low number. But I added up the number of games played by the 6 defensemen the Blue Jackets skated in that game. And it was like 505 total games going into that game. Tops was Vladislav Gavrikov, just over 150. And then you had Jay Christensen on the other side. But that's an average of like about 80 games per player on the defensive side for the defenseman. Mm-hmm. And then, that's a position where experience matters. You get better with age as you go. And that just drove home how young that group is and how much how much potential they really have and how much they can grow over the years. Because, PK Subban was on the other side. He's played 780 some NHL games. The entire 6-man defensive core for the Blue Jackets have played 500. That just goes to show you how young it is, how inexperienced it is. But they're hanging in there. They're getting better by the day. They're going to be a lot better in a year or two. It'll be really interesting to watch because not only is it a group that, as Bob said, can score, which I think is a really unique out of an NHL defensive core these days. But on top of that, if they get better defensively and learn the craft as they go on, it could be a really fun group to watch. That's for sure.
Yeah, one thing Jeff alluded to right there, that trade was made with Chicago, and Chicago is thought to be one of only 3 teams that Seth Jones would have gone to. The other 2 were Colorado and Dallas. Mm-hmm. And I don't even know how much those were in the mix. So the fact that Jarmo Kekalainen got all of that out of the Chicago Blackhawks tells me one thing, that he's very disappointed Stan Bowman no longer is a general manager in Chicago because he got him for Brandon Saad. Then when that didn't work, he turned around, he got him for Artemi Panarin, and then he got this deal out of him. I think he'll miss him there.
He sure will. I wanted to touch base with that 12th overall pick there, Cole Sillinger, you both mentioned in that big trade. Columbus, of course, with that trade, of course, did a great job replenishing their talent pool. 12th overall pick in this past summer, Cole Sillinger. He's been playing pretty much since day one of this season, and Brad Lawson feels he can play in every single situation. Is it the right move to bring him up this early at such a young age, and how's his development going so far, Bob?
Yeah, it's the right move because you have a team that's supposed to be retooling, rebuilding, whatever word you want to use. And it's and really, look, do they think they were going to the playoffs at the start of this year? Does management think that? I don't think they do. So you're a development team. Brad Larson is a development coach. With Sillinger, it was actually – you had options with him because he could either go to junior or because he was coming out of the USHL, they could have sent him to Cleveland to play in the American Hockey League. He didn't have to be in Columbus and playing, but he had such a good camp. He earned the chance to start in Columbus. And then, you can play those 10 games before they send you somewhere else. And he got to the end of that. And he had a fantastic game in Colorado, and there was no way he was going anywhere once he hit the 9 games. So, and I know that he was playing a lot of minutes early on in a lot of big situations, and that's tapered off because of what Jeff said earlier. You start that travel. I don't care. You're 18 years old. You're playing against men, and all of a sudden, in addition to that, and playing almost every other day, now you're flying out to Arizona and playing, and then you're going to Vegas, and then you're coming home, and then you're going back and you're going to Colorado, and it's it does wear on you. You have to learn how to handle everything, and he will. I mean, his dad played in the league for a long time. He's been around it his entire life. He gets it, but you still have to adapt to it. So his minutes have gone down. His role has gone down. That's not a surprise. There's a wall that you're going to hit. But I think the overall body of work is been good. I think he's going to be very important for this franchise. But personally, the only thing that I worry about is the confidence factor because it's easy to have a guy play in the National Hockey League for the entire year and get that year in. But what you also want to make sure is that you can keep him in a positive situation where he is going to develop and he's going to feel good about himself. I mean, he's had a lot of great shots this year that haven't gone into the net. And again, you're playing against NHL goalies, not USHL goalies, not Western Hockey League goalies. NHL goalies, the best in the world. So I just hope, and he seems like he's very level-headed. So I hope that confidence stays up with him. That's the only thing that I wouldn't want to have happen is him to start to question whether or not he's going to be as good as he thought he was back in training camp. But again, overall, I have no problem with this kid. He's played much more mature than an 18-year-old, and the upside for him is really, really big.
Yeah, and just knowing Cole a little bit, not a ton because he's only been here for a little while, but he does seem like the kid that this is not going to hurt his confidence. And I totally understand. That is the thing I think people worry about the most when you have these young guys playing at the NHL level, because there's going to have ups and downs, and there's probably more downs and ups when you're 18 years old playing in the NHL. I think there are some people that could hurt their confidence. I don't think Cole is one of those guys. I think he gets it. He understands what it's like to play at this level. He understands what it all takes. I guess when your dad's Mike Sillinger, that's part of it. You kind of learn those lessons early. But even for a son of a former player, he's incredibly level-headed and incredibly mature from that aspect of it. Anytime you see him, anytime you talk to him, he doesn't seem that he's, even if he has a rough game, he just learns from it. He doesn't seem disappointed by it. And at the end of the day, I'd rather have him here playing 12, 13, 14 minutes and really learning what it's like to play at the NHL level than have him. I think he would have been in medicine hat. He probably would have been scoring 3 points a game, 2 goals and 3 points a game, and against people that he's just so much better than. So what would he really have gotten from that either? So I think that, this is the right path for him. He's the kind of guy that, even though I think he will score more as he goes on, and Bob is right, his offensive numbers aren't super great, but he's had a lot of chances. He's had a lot of looks that just haven't gone in, that'll probably go in as he gets older. And on top of that, this is a guy, he's killing penalties as the youngest player in the NHL. The other night against the Devils, they're protecting a 1-goal lead in the last minute, full cylinders on the ice. This is a guy they already trust to understand the game. And that's the hardest part for any young player to get. And the fact that he's already there, no concerns about this development. I think it's, if you look at the average 18-year-old in the NHL, sure, Austin Matthews came in and it was incredible. Connor McDavid was incredible. But a guy like Jack Hughes, who now looks like a star in the making, at 18 years old, he was number 1 overall pick, and he had his fair share of ups and downs as well. For Cole to be number 12 overall, pretty much on kind of that same development path and looking the part, no concerns about how this is going. And he's been a great addition so far and just going to keep getting better.
All right, before we go, I did want to throw one hard ball at you guys. I was going to talk about Voracek not playing, at least only getting 1 goal so far. Domi trying to now find his groove in the Blue Jacket sweater. But coming into this deadline in a couple of months, who's available? Laine, Domi, Roslovic, Korpisalo? Jeff?
Yeah, that's going to be the great question for this team because at the end of the day, the real focus of this team, and any success they have this year is kind of the cherry on top.
Someone's hungry.
Yeah, exactly. I'm starving lunch right after this. But any success they'd have this year would be a cherry on top, and that I think they know that what they're looking for is in the next 2 to 3 years they're trying to build a team that's going to be a consistent playoff contender and a Stanley Cup contender. So the aim of this season and even the start of next season, and maybe even a year into that, is building this team to be at its best as these young guys mature and as some of their players hit their prime and stuff like that. And so they are building for down the road. And a guy like Max Domi, who's in the last year of a contract, obviously I think that makes him someone that they would look at as a potential trade chip. Jack Roslovic's only on a 2-year deal. And he's, he had a great year last year. He struggled a bit this year. He's a guy that, you're playing this year to figure out what do you have in Jack Roslovic. And I think certainly with Elvis Merzlikins signing the contract that he signed and the play of the rookie Daniil Tarasov when he's had to go in, Jonas Korpisalo is probably in his last season with the Blue Jackets. And so you try to get the most out of him. So I would say Domi and Korpisalo would be the 2 guys I think are at the top of the list as they're looking for deals. And I also think that Laine is a guy I think is going to be here a while. Maybe I'm completely wrong on that. I could be, totally misreading the tea leaves, but I think he likes it here. He's a unique player. He scores. If they're building the team they think they're building, he doesn't have to be a superstar. They're not going to necessarily build around him, but he's a great piece to have because he can score unlike so many players in the league. And I think in the long haul, I could see him being here for a long time. I could be wrong, but that's just my read on the situation.
I agree with that. Listen, you have a team that doesn't score goals, and you have a guy that has scored 40 in the past, okay? Like, it's very easy to look at Patrick Laine and say, oh, he's not doing this or he's not doing that. I don't care. He's still young, and I'm sure that the one concern they're going to have is what's the number going to be that they're going to have to give him per year when it comes to fitting into the salary cap structure of this team. Okay, I get that. But there is no way I would look at trading this guy right now. Not a chance. You can still qualify him again next year if you want to do that. I wouldn't do it. Max Domi, absolutely. Top of the list. No question about it. Nothing against Max. I mean, he's on the expiring contract, as Jeff said, and some nights he looks really good. And some nights you don't see him. He hasn't been consistent in that. But when you're talking about somebody that can play with an edge and that can play wing and center, and I would be surprised if there wouldn't be a playoff team that's interested in that to take their run before the season's over. I think Gus Nyquist is another guy that I don't think it's guaranteed that he's staying here. There are more forwards that are coming. Again, we're talking about trade deadlines. So you're talking about teams that are looking for experience, guys that have done it before, guys that can bring something to the table in the playoffs. I think it's fair to, consider his name. The Korpisalo thing, here's my only concern about it. I still think, yes, if you're going to trade one of them, it more than likely is him. But I think his value's gone down this year because he started injured during training camp. He got a late start. Then it seemed like when he got put into the games, the team played terribly in those games. So he didn't, his numbers don't look good. Then he gets sick, not COVID. He gets sick and he's out. Then he gets COVID and he's out. I mean, like, if you're going to make a trade for a guy, you want to see the guy play and you want his numbers to be good. It concerns me. I'm not saying that somebody won't take him. I just don't know if you're going to get for him now what you would have gotten for him last summer. And, I guess he can still turn that around by the way that he plays. The Merzlikins contract's very tradable, by the way. But at this point, Daniil Tarasov's going to be the starting goaltender for this team. He's going to. It's not going to be this year. It's not going to be next year, maybe halfway through next year. But that's going to be a fact. So somewhere down the line, they're going to have to deal with the other part of it. But, to me, and Jeff brought up Jack Roslovic. I know he's a centerman, but if there was a team, if it was me, and it's not, and I never want to be a GM, and maybe it's good based on what I'm going to tell you. If it was me and somebody was interested in him, I'd really consider that. I'd really flip him because I just think he's as good as he was last year. I think he's been underwhelming this year when it comes to that. I think if you could get a piece or a pick that you like for that, I would consider it. But so my list is a little bit longer than Jeff's. And Domi, Nyquist, Roslovic, Korpisalo, so I'd have on my list.
Again, you can find him on Twitter at Jackets Insider for Jeff and for Bob at Bobby Mac Sports. Thank you both for joining me.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
I want to thank everybody who tunes into the show every week. It's been difficult times for all of us, and I just wanted to stop in here and say thank you for listening to my show. Thank you for sharing it when you get a chance, and that I'll be taking a hiatus for a bit now. My health is not doing well, and I need a break. Hopefully I can figure this out, and once I figure this out, I'll be back. I'll be back. And I will be back. Stay healthy and stay strong. And call your loved ones whenever you get a chance. And call that friend that you haven't called in a long time. They might need that. Thank you. And I want to also thank my family and my friends and the doctors who have helped me so far. And as well all my guests who have always been on my show. Thank you very much. Until next time, hit the music. If you've enjoyed anything you've heard in this episode or don't, please tweet at me or even our guests. You can follow me on Twitter at PBojaranov or the entire team at Jablam Sports. You can use the hashtag Jablam Sports. That's JABLAM Sports. If you want to also contact us on our website, go to jablamsports.com/contact. Also, you can find all our info for all our guests and our podcasts, for even game notes for each episode, including this one. You'll get guests' info and links to all the things we mentioned on this show. We even have weekly content articles. Please subscribe, rate, and review us on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts, including Spotify. And of course, click on the 3 dots in your podcasting app and share this episode with 3 friends you know. Please and thank you. Jablam Sports Hockey is your one-stop weekly shop for every expert analysis on every single team. We are a fun community bringing everyone together. Follow us on Facebook. Thank you, everyone. And to every one of our listeners, we're giving you a virtual hug. Stay healthy, listen, be yourself, and stay strong.